Once upon a time, there was a wild open land that spread for miles and miles. Incredible biodiversity prevailed, and a wide array of biomes such as deserts, forests, scrub, mountains, and coastal lands thrived. The constant between all these diverse regions was their common inhabitant, the tens of thousands of grizzly bears spread across the land. This land was California. Yes, that California. What is now home to many an urban metropolis was once and still is a biological hotspot. The iconic bear on the California flag is something we're all familiar with. But once you think about it, what big bears are in California? It turns out this bear is modeled after a famous one named Monarch, who was captured in California in the 19th century. Monarch was an example of the species of grizzly bear called the California chaparral bear. Sadly and surprisingly, due to their high population numbers, the California chaparral grizzly was hunted to extinction. In 1908, this realization was a wake-up call to the citizens of California. This story was also the opening of the book I read for the class. It was titled After the Grizzly, Endangered Species and the Politics of Place in California. The author, Peter S. Algona, has turned the politics of place and defined it as ongoing cultural conversations about who should have access to and control over lands and natural resources. The sudden extinction of a once prolific species also sparked the curiosity of many Californians. Joseph Grinnell founded the Museum of Vertebrate Biology, beginning the great tradition of naturalists and conservationists from and focused on the state of California. Him and his students were called the Berkeley Circle, and they were very focused on education of the public. One of their outreach tools were magazines such as the Western Wildlife Call. Early on, the most common tactic for conservation was the use of regulations for hunting. This meant that most of the species protected under the law were game species. Heading out of the Progressive Era, it began to be more about habitat protection rather than hunting regulations, and more about bureaucracy than lobbying. Thus begins the story of our next four species. The precedent of the grizzly bear set forth their motions, and suddenly people were interested in conservation, especially in California. Much like the California grizzly, the condor was hunted for predator control. The only difference is that the condor isn't actually a predator. Another major reason for the decline in the California condor populations was due to DDT. Consumption of marine mammals high on the food chain meant that they were getting higher concentrations of the pesticides. This caused thinning of their eggshells and higher mortality in chicks. Amazingly, the California condor was successful at captive breeding and reintroduction. According to Jane Goodall, the condor's tale is nothing less than a huge success story. The desert tortoise, on the other hand, didn't have problems so much with hunting, but with habitat degradation and, actually, pet ownership. Roads being built and deserts open to motorcycling were big problems. More roads and access also meant more tourists who would take tortoises home in their bags as pets. The pet trade also meant that there were lots of diseases spread throughout the population more quickly. The San Joaquin kit fox doesn't live in an area that's as easily protected. The San Joaquin Valley is known for industrial agriculture and fossil fuel extraction. Sadly, this area is also home to many endemic species. This degradation of the land is not only hurting the animals, but also the humans that highly are reliant on the agricultural economic system. The kit fox has been prevented from extinction, but the population is not recovering. Despite collaborative management that has worked well to protect the waterway systems, the Delta smelt population is still in decline due to pollution that has not been controlled. Due to the high value of water in California, this has been a very heated debate about this protection. It has even caused some people to say that others were choosing fish over people. The so-called fish versus people debate is really just people's interests versus people's interests. It takes whole communities working together to achieve a sustainable future. This book indirectly discussed the tragedy of the commons repeatedly, both in relation to water resources and game animals. It also really focused on the economic and social equity pillars of sustainability. It really brought in all the different things we talked about in class and put them into context. This book has really made me change the way I look at species listed as threatened or endangered. It has also opened my eyes to the extremely interesting history of zoology and conservation and the unique ecology of California. Lastly, it has changed my opinions of reservations and habitat protection. Protecting endangered species habitat does little to nothing. Quality of habitat based on low pollution, lack of competition from exotic species, large area with buffer zones, and low predation by humans and other animals are much more important. Additionally, I had never thought about endangered species that thrive in urban centers or who are popular pets, and ways in which to control their populations. The great takeaway was that the more highly politicized a region is, the harder it is to actually accomplish conservation. This is seen with the example of the San Joaquin Valley, the highly economically complicated region which was home to the two least successful species conservation stories in the book. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger said it best when discussing the Delta smelt. The time for action is now. The Delta is in crisis, and each day brings us closer to a major disaster. The Delta cannot be fixed by any single action, nor can water needs be met by any single action. No matter what policy choices are made, we are compelled to change the ways we behave toward the environment and the water.